back. Oh my God. It's been a million billion light years since the last episode.
Lo siento.
But I've had some pretty good excuses, I think. I had to write a couple new pieces. I had to buy a new computer. I've been traveling a lot for work. Y'all, I'm doing the best I can, okay? But I'm happy to be back because this is a very special episode of Artillery where I'll be chatting with a longtime friend, Andrew Munn. In the 3 or 4 months since the last episode, it's safe to say that we weren't without a fair share of political arts news, most of which I'm sure you're all caught up on by now, including WNO leaving the Kennedy Center and the actual closure of the Kennedy Center for the next couple of years due to quote-unquote renovation. But interestingly enough, this is the time that opera companies and symphony orchestras are rolling out their seasons, and from what I've seen so far, I made a post on social media asking the question, has anybody seen an opera company or symphony season roll out that they're actually excited about? You know, I was trying to see something. And I think I saw it. I got a range of answers, but I should have been more specific, I suppose. Folks chimed in about seeing rare works from the composers whose names we all see all the time, the ones who go by their last names only. And, you know, I can't fault folks for getting excited about some rare Handel opera if that's your thing. I mean, I know the CSO is playing Chassis 7 next year around this time, so guess where I'll be. But I think you know the intent behind my post. I'm looking for new music, and if I'm being more specific, what happened to all the women and folks of color who were sprinkled throughout various company seasons in the last couple of years? Now it feels like we're dipping back into the ice cream container and the flavor is, well, let's just say, devoid of toppings. I maintain my stance about regional companies and how that's where the magic seems to happen. The big companies are living museums steeped in years and years of tradition, and it's their brand, I suppose, and that's the way it is, I guess. But looking at the Chicago Symphony's 26-27 season, for example, I mean, with the exception of Tan Dun's Water Concerto and the Sierra and Marquez Fandangos, everything else is kind of what you might expect, with the exception of a few rare things here and there. Man, I wish they didn't get rid of music now, because they don't seem to be really making up for the lack of contemporary music in other places. Now, let's compare that with, say, Oakland Symphony, for example. Way more interesting season, and way more in line, in my opinion, with how concerts should look in the 21st century. You got a nice mix of old and new. You got some Brahms, you got some Anthony Davis, Paul Hindemith, Clarice Assad, Lauryn Hill, Irene Britton Smith, Samuel Coleridge Taylor. I'm actually also on the program with my first piano concerto, and I would like to invite you to go to their webpage and check out what they're cooking for next season. Now, that is something that I can get excited about, and if I live closer, I'd probably be a seasoned subscriber. I'm also really curious to know what's happening in the museum world. Like, what y'all doing over there? Oh, speaking of museums, I did see the Giants exhibit at the Virginia Museum of Fine Arts. This is the exhibit that is part of the private collection of Alicia Keys and Swiss Beats. And man, let me tell you, I left so inspired, not only by the art, but by the droves of people from all walks of life who came in to see the show, not only racially, but generationally. There was a heightened sense of pride, curiosity, and belonging in the space. And it was pretty tangible, I have to say. My next guest on Artillery is my longtime friend, Andrew Munn. Andrew and I met in 2006 at the Aspen Music Festival. We became friends not only because we were both basses in the program, but I think we had a mutual admiration for each other. You know, I actually don't know what he thought of me, but I can say without hesitation, I became very fond of Andrew. I mean, he's such a nice guy. Anyway, he's expanding the possibilities of his art by fusing a titan of song literature, Schubert's Winterreise, with climate activism in a piece he calls postWinterreise. Andrew says postWinterreise is a fragmentation of Schubert's Winterreise performed in a sculptural installation of melting ice, flowing water, and resonant objects. The work's physical and sonic structure traces 200 years of environmental history since Schubert's composition. As atmospheric carbon dioxide levels depart from pre-industrial norms and the ice of Austria's Hallstätter glacier melts, Schubert's music erodes away, and the song cycle's familiar narrative of lost love and winter intertwines with a meditation on our changing environment. And so after 20 years of Andrew and I passing each other in the halls of social media, we had a lot of catching up to do.
So yeah, I'm not in shock, but I'm just really happy to see you. But I think it's cool that you're exploring these other facets of your life. What got you into it?
Well, I would say it's not just because we're talking about, I'll frame it around our time at Aspen in 2006.
Yeah.
But around that time, I got really involved in environmental politics and like climate change activism. In 2006, I think actually that summer I'd gone in Aspen, like I'd gone to see an Inconvenient Truth in the movie theater with this Korean-based baritone that I think he went back to South Korea, and I never saw him again. But I went to see an Inconvenient Truth, and it was part of this kind of first big upswell of climate awareness. And also for me, it was, I was 19, turning 20 that summer, and I think it was also a little bit of a maturation from kind of kind, well-meaning liberal perspective on the world to then starting to see some of the more structural challenges and structural injustices that were at work in the world around us.
Right.
And basically, after that summer in Aspen, I decided to leave music for a while, and I threw myself entirely into climate organizing.
Mm.
And that was really a chapter of 8 years or so, 2 more years that I was in university, and then I moved to West Virginia, and I worked as a community organizer for 5 or 6 years, mostly working around coal mining issues.
Okay, I do remember this period of
there's like there were occasional dispatches that made it out on Facebook from somewhere deep in the coal fields that I had moved to.
Yeah, I have to admit, I was like, what is Andrew doing?
What is he doing in West Virginia? Well, I was like, so there were these retired coal miners and who were basically on speaking tours of universities around that time, like 2006, 2007, 2008, that they were organizing against large-scale surface mining in West Virginia. So instead of going into the mountains were being blown up, literally landscapes leveled to scrape out every bit of coal. And there was some local resistance to this, but the state politics were entirely bought by the coal companies. So local activists decided to basically go national and try to get whatever national activist energy they could get. And it got all of my heartstrings, and I moved there, and it was this kind of incredible period of living in a culture that was entirely different than what I'd grown up in California and in a little university town in Pennsylvania, State College, Pennsylvania.
So you say you gave up music. Did you you weren't singing at all?
I had my Schubert Liederbuch with me, like kind of 100 selected songs, Schubert low voice edition.
Yeah.
And I had a few opera scores with me, but I'd gotten off the professional track. Especially for the first 5 years, no part of me really thought I was going to go back to it. I would say also at that point, it's like I still had a relationship with music, especially where I was listening to a lot of opera and a lot of song, but I felt so basically estranged from the institutions of classical music, and not necessarily so much institutions of classical music, but the forms of political and cultural power that they kind of aligned with, like this kind of one of the things I would say at the time was that it felt to me like too much of our art form was a kind of decorative, a decoration of oppressive histories and oppressive systems.
Yep.
And I think that's like often still the case. It's been good to see, I think, in recent years, some of that start to shift. And I hope that that's a shift that can like continue despite all the current blowback.
Yeah, I hope so too, because it feels like we have taken some steps back.
Does it? I mean, so that's my perspective. That it's like in the last, basically since Trump 2.0,
right,
that there's been like, yeah, the Washington National Opera is leaving the Kennedy Center, but
yeah. And apparently it's closing.
Yeah, that was wild news. That we're jumping around a lot, but like that, the day that I saw that news, I just signed a contract for doing the Bernstein Mass in Hamburg this spring. Will Liverman will be singing the baritone, the main baritone role, and I'll do a bass solo at the end of it. But that piece was written for the opening of the Kennedy Center, and it's this kind of epic of political. I would say like it's an epic of like political and spiritual heterogeneity. Is that how you say it? Heterogeneous. A big mixture of politics and spirituality.
Yeah.
And I mean, it's going to be an amazing time to do it in Hamburg, and I hope we can kind of like throw some of that energy back across the ocean. But
yeah, send some of that energy this way because we need. I mean, my hope is that because there is such an attack on artists right now and journalists for that matter, is that we all just kind of band together and fight the systems through our art as best as we can. And maybe some of these steps that we've taken back will actually be some steps forward, you know, when we look back and say, oh, actually, we were making some progress at that time.
Yeah, so it's also like, I always think in moments like this, it's also a confirmation of how important it is, what we do.
Yeah.
I think maybe like we came of age and had our early careers in a time where like, yeah, I felt like music and culture felt important, but there wasn't necessarily a sense of active, so much of a sense of active struggle or active like pushback around like the basic idea that you should be able to express the truths that you want to express in your music.
Yeah.
And but I think when we see things like the way that the Trump administration has grabbed at the Kennedy Center, that it's you know, it confirms that what we do is important. It makes me think of like Stalin and Shostakovich. It's like, it's a huge. I mean, it's a huge endorsement of the power of the arts when the state is acting in that way to repress. So like,
yeah, Shostakovich is he's my favorite composer, probably in the last few years, and I think it's because I feel like I do. I mean, to say that I identify with Shostakovich is like a very big statement, but I think you know what I mean. Like the seed of the statement is there's so much that can be learned from, or you can identify with Shostakovich and the Stalin years because of, you know, what we're going through right now. And, you know, it's interesting because I go back and forth about whether or not I want to be a quote unquote political composer. And, you know, there are times when I just want to write a piece of music just for music's sake. But then like stuff happens and it's like, oh, actually, I have something that I need to say about it. And I do wonder if it's like if I'm kind of shooting myself in the foot because of the political, you know, it kind of goes back to what you said earlier. It's like when we were, you know, kind of starting or whatever.
My line was always that it was like a decoration of an oppressive system.
There it is. And so when 2020 happened, I was like, oh, I'm gonna flip this. I'm gonna flip the script a little bit. And
You were ahead of the ball though, and that I think you were writing the African American Requiem before 2020.
yes, I started writing that in 2016. Trump 1.0.
Yeah.
So it was kind of starting then.
I think that this is something I think about right now because I think it's really important to be on the record, and it's like I think when I'm doing music projects that like could be interpreted as activist, say, I almost never feel like I want my performance or most of what I'm doing also when I'm creating something is mostly working with texts or writing librettos or writing song texts. I don't feel like I want there to be like an activist response necessarily, but it's more that like this subject matter is incredibly rich. It's really important, and I think it's more like, for me, it's like I want to be to some extent on the record about the things that are in the world right now.
Yeah.
And I think like when you think about, like you said, just like all these composers of the past whose pieces had explicit or implicit political motivations or contexts to them, it's like you're on the record. And these pieces, again, like a piece like the African American Requiem will like it will be looked at as a document of its time, and that's pretty awesome.
Yeah.
And it's also an incredible. I really think it's also a real service like that. Like to do that and to take the time to articulate that. Like, correct me if I'm wrong, but like, was there a commission for that, or were you? I remember seeing you kind of like. You were posting these really incredibly focused, purpose-driven kind of updates on your compositional process on Facebook while you were working on it.
Yeah. So it ended up being a commission, but it was not a commission at first.
But you had to build it first, yeah.
Yeah. So that's that was nice. Yeah, it's funny because some of those memories come through Facebook every once in a while. I get memories. And it's like,
Facebook memories serves backup. A more innocent time.
I know. Finishing the Lacrimosa. Just started another movement, blah, blah, blah. So, all right. Let's talk about postWinterreise. It's premiering at Tanglewood this April?
Yeah.
Tell me everything about this, because I'm so curious, like, why you chose the song cycle in particular. Are you doing the whole thing? I mean, it's just a monumental piece, so I can there's something very poetic about choosing that too, and talking about this kind of bigness of climate change.
Yeah, postWinterreise, it puts a fragmentation of Schubert's Winterreise in conversation with sound art that deals with climate change and more broadly like environmental change. And it grew out of, I think it really grew out of my experience of doing Winterreise by itself. And I think for me, like the experience of doing a big song cycle is there's always the text that you're singing, and then there's the subtext. There's what do you find yourself discovering while you're going through this emotional journey of the cycle. And I think I turned to Winterreise when I was at Bard right after my activist time in West Virginia. And I think because I was really processing internally a lot of things about my relationship to climate activism, still thinking about our relationship to nature and to natural systems. I found myself kind of like processing this sense of what I would call like ecological grief while I was also in the act of singing it. Also like processing in parallel kind of plenty of emotional and relationship ups and downs that happened through those years too. But I do try to, these days especially, I try not to get too like personal with like drawing on like one's love life and doing Schubert songs. I think this is both not advisable and also maybe not that interesting to the public. So
It's also really hard. I mean,
yeah,
such a
that's the not advisable part.
yeah.
Should we do the Winterreise 101 right now?
Yeah, let's do Winterreise 101.
Okay. I feel like there could be great very like party game ways of party game ways of doing that. What to me it starts with the very kind of romantic trope of lost love. Wanderer goes out, whether the wanderer was the one to leave the relationship or was left by its beloved, it's ambiguous. And the wanderer leaves and goes forth into a winter landscape. And the first half of the cycle is kind of always looking back at this relationship, whether in longing for it or anger or looking at his own grief. And then in the second half of the cycle, it's 24 songs. So the first 12 songs we have looking back at the relationship and the emotions about it. And then in the 13th song, there is one mention of the beloved saying like, this letter is coming from the town where I once had my beloved. And then for the remainder of the cycle, the remaining 12 songs, there's no mention of the beloved, and it becomes a kind of journey into a sense of alienation, I think, from society, and then in the figure of the Layaman, a musician playing outside of town who nobody pays attention to, but this musician doesn't seem to mind that nobody pays attention to. He's always playing. This might be death. This might be. I also kind of like to think of it as a literal figure of somebody that's outside of society and is okay with that, and that there's a certain freedom in that. And Schubert wrote it at the end of his life. He was 31, making edits on his deathbed, which kind of gives it a little bit more. I guess that will give anything more gravitas.
Yeah.
But I think ultimately, to me, when I sing Winterreise, it's like I know that I'm gonna have an experience when I start to sing it. And if I'm going to go through the whole cycle, I don't know where it's going to take me. And I hope that transmits for audiences too. To me, there's this element of it being a little bit of it's like a labyrinth, and I don't know where it's going to go in terms of the associations that arise on any given evening.
Yeah, I mean it's a devastating piece.
There are moments in the cycle when I'm performing where I do feel like, God, like I'm so like I almost feel like I should apologize to the like in Frühlingstraum, the 11th song. It's like this kind of beautiful image of this beautiful possible spring, and then it's just like boom, really collapses back into winter and grief. And there are these moments of the cycle that do feel cruel, actually.
Yeah.
But I think it's like, I don't know. I've never done anything that I've actually called shadow work, but like I think it's like, but I'm like maybe Winterreise is shadow work.
Yeah. I mean, why did you choose Winterreise? Did we talk about this? I mean, there are other sort of spring song cycles out there. Songs of Travel, for example.
Yeah. Well, it grabbed me early on. I remember. So I was working at the music library at University of Michigan, and that was back in the day of CDs. And I would check out after every shift. I would take out 10 CDs and burn them onto my computer. And I pretty early in the semester, I did this with the collected recordings of Hans Hotte, bass baritone. For our listeners, I know you know him. And there were 3 recordings of Winterreise on this collected works. One from when he was in his 30s, one from when he was probably late 40s, one from when he was maybe in his early 60s. And I did not know Winterreise before just listening to these CDs, and I thought, like, and there were a few songs that just like grabbed me. I was like, what is this? What is this music? I think especially when I think back to that, I think it was probably the 15th and 16th song, Die Krähe and Letzte Hoffnung. Letzte Hoffnung especially is like, it feels like you've stepped into the second Viennese school 100 years later
yeah,
in
totally.
music history. and and the music just grabbed me, and I started singing it early on. Like I went to my teacher at University of Michigan was George Shirley, and I said, like, I've been listening to this Winterreise, and he was like, well, don't sing that yet. And I was like, but like, can I start? And he was like, okay, well, we can do 5 songs.
Okay.
So and we did the first 5 of Winterreise, and that was what I did in my undergrad, from Gute Nacht to Der Lindenbaum, which I think makes a really nice little set. And it got into my system. It kind of became I don't feel like it's a backdrop to my life in terms of the emotional content of it, fortunately, or like in terms of like the direct emotional content of the way it talks about love and relationships. But to me, it's become very like, I want to say it's like very generative material. Like I think there's an incredible dramaturgy to the cycle that can be almost like transposed into different forms. And I think that's a reason why it's such a there's so many works of visual art or literature that are out there based around the structure of Winterreise. But I think it does, like the poetry itself is also it's really it's very simple poetry in a way. Like the language is direct, and they're metaphors, but the language is not at all elevated. It's like
It's
a
really
flying over me. Does it want to eat me?
Yep.
At least somebody cares about me.
Yeah, it's the perfect text for a song cycle, or dare I even say an opera, because
Yeah.
the text is so direct and it's very succinct in a lot of ways. Um, I'm sitting here wondering like how Schubert chose this text.
He didn't know Mueller, and there's this wonderful anecdote, or I think it might be from Mueller's letters, where he wrote to a friend something like, "If only somebody would find my poems and write music to them, because as poems they're only half alive." And like, then he dies in like 1827, never knowing that like 1827, that might not be the exact date.
Yeah.
He dies not knowing that Schubert had already composed Die Schöne Müllerin to his texts, and was in the process of composing Winterreise. Another thing I think, especially for like for us as musicians, as performers of Winterreise, is the original poems from Müller are, the title that he gave to the collection was "The Left Behind Papers of a Traveling Horn Player."
Oh wow.
It's like,
Not very sexy.
no, not very sexy, but like traveling musician, something strange about it being like left behind papers, so it's like they're not even thought of as poems. It's so in Winterreise, it's a constant, like each piece is full of the wanderer seeing himself or seeing his inner state reflected in nature, and reflected in ice, and reflected in snow, and reflected also in its melting. And so to me, it felt like an amazing kind of time capsule of the time in which it was written, where winter still had this kind of overwhelming presence, which it seems like it kind of also does this winter. I'm happy to see.
Yeah.
And I wanted to put that that kind of past relationship to winter in conversation with like the sense today that like ice and glaciers and winter itself is this kind of like threatened, fragile thing that we might be losing to some extent. And the way that I've gone about doing that has been in collaboration with sound artist Kat Austin, whose practice has to do mostly with listening and field recording. So going not just to nature, but to any soundscape, and doing really intentional recordings that try to highlight and foreground aspects of the human relationship with nature.
Mm.
And we went through the cycle, and we kind of made a ecological reading of the poetry. Not saying like, oh, this is not saying like, oh, Schubert meant to like write an environmental message in the piece, or
Right.
Müller was really a secret conservationist in 1825. But saying like, what does this reveal to us about like the assumptions in our relationship to the natural world, or what does this say to us? What does it say about the assumptions? It's really kind of trying to dig into what is the invisible, unsaid things about our relationship to non-humans, and how do we then bring those aspects more to the foreground? And the way of doing that has been with working with field recordings from Kat Austin, and then I've also in the last year I've developed a sound installation that's part of the performance, where actually like a block of melting ice is on stage. It's dripping onto a panel of metal and flows it into a basin. And throughout this little basically flow system, each element is amplified with contact microphones, so microphones that capture the vibration of the material itself.
Yeah.
And embedded in the material are vibrating transducers, which take the sound of the voice and piano and turn it into vibration and put that into the ice, put that into the metal, put that into the basin. And it makes it a kind of like a physical sound transformation system.
This is so interesting.
And it's been this like I had never went into electronics before a year ago. And I was like, no, I'm an analog only. I'm totally analog. Only biological sounds coming out of me. But the thing, we had this residency, and we were the software we were using, Ableton, like a lot of recording software, of course, comes with like endless drop-down menus of ways of transforming sound digitally. So like basically digital sound effects that you can put on whatever you're recording. And because the piece was dealing with changes in the material world and then the ecological world, we wanted to get beyond trying to find like a sound effect that like gave a cold vibe, and really like say, okay, what is the sound of the voice in a chunk of ice?
Wow.
And a year and a half ago, I could not have told you how to figure that out. But fortunately, and I think this is also Berlin. It's like, this is a city full of sound nerds and sound mad scientists, and I've been able to like befriend enough of them for them to say like, oh, you should get this transducing vibrator thing and connect it to the block of ice, and then you can and from these kind of basic principles, and then having the time to really just like figure out how this shit works.
This is just like you were saying earlier. It's like it's recontextualizing and reimagining old things from that we.
This is exactly it.
It's really cool. So I mean, I have so many questions. It's not the whole cycle, right?
It is the whole cycle.
What is the whole cycle?
Yeah, we are doing the whole cycle.
Oh my gosh. This sounds
because I'm a glutton for punishment.
Are you doing memorize?
Well, that's a good question. So at Tanglewood, it'll be a double header. On the first night, we'll do Winterreise in its original form.
Okay.
And then the next night will be postWinterreise.
You are a glutton for punishment.
Yeah. Good God. And then I go straight to Hamburg and into rehearsals for the Bernstein Mass. It's like I'm looking at like, well,
you'll be fine. No.
There'll be a future. There'll be a future.
Yeah. It's okay. So you have this big chunk of ice. Where do you get the ice from?
Well, in my dreams, it's like I'm gonna have friends going to the Hudson River and hauling some chunks of ice out right now. So if any of you hear that, but more realistically, it'll be a walk-in freezer that Tanglewood has a walk-in freezer for their catering business, and we can commandeer part of that.
Okay.
Here in my studio, I got a big kind of basically an ice cream freezer, like a big chest freezer off of the equivalent of Craigslist for $200, and there's some big chunks freezing in there right now.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah, I've gone deep. I've gone far away from any centered norm anymore.
So when you are singing the postWinterreise, from whose perspective are you singing? Like, what story?
That's a really good question. The way that, so I'm describing it as a fragmentation of Winterreise, and it begins with almost all of the music still in place. And the rate of fragmentation of the music increases as the evening goes on. So by the end of the cycle, there's very little musical material from Schubert left. They're just kind of small fragments or pitch material, rhythmic motives that still show up from the piano and also from the voice, also isolated words. And in this, the way that with the pianist for the project, Eleonora Petz, the way that we're imagining this is that it's almost like, do you remember, it's only now a little more than a year ago, but in the fires in Los Angeles, the Schoenberg archive burned.
Yeah.
That happened while we were working on a piece in a residency in Berlin last year. And I think that kind of influenced our approach to the fragmentation and in the way that we kind of imagined it. That it's kind of like we imagine ourselves finding a manuscript of what remains of the piece after an event like that, or after in a kind of post climate change, semi-apocalyptic sense. So as the piece starts, it starts as Winterreise, and then as it goes further, it feels like a little bit glitchy. More of it falls apart, and and it goes then between, I think there are frames, where it's like for maybe 30 seconds, you're back in 1828 Lieder Salon world, and then it breaks down again. And in those moments of breakdown, I think there's more of a sense of alienation. I'm not necessarily singing it from like trying to present my perspective as Andrew, but it's like presenting material that is left behind. So I think actually, in a way, there might be less of my own emotiveness in the post-Winterreise than there is in a Winterreise performance.
Interesting. So is there still sort of this deteriorating kind of character that you're singing, or is it the world around you that's kind of deteriorating?
I think it is less of a, so in Winterreise is less of a, let me back up. So the world around the music is deteriorating or changing, and I think it's more that the music becomes less foregrounded, and more of these sounds, and more of the sound of ice become foregrounded as the evening goes on.
Yeah.
And the wanderer, the perspective of the wanderer becomes, in a way, it becomes less central. It becomes less focused. It becomes less the focal point. The focal point becomes less like this kind of story of an individual person's emotional journey. And this I think resonates with our central idea of like wanting to bring aspects of the non-human world more into the foreground, and less this kind of like prolonged emotional breakdown.
Yeah.
Which, I mean, I also love a good prolonged emotional breakdown.
mean, it's almost as if I mean, I could be totally off base here, but it's almost as if the Earth takes the place of the Wanderer, and instead of
Mhm.
you know what I'm saying?
I think that's a good. Yeah. Thank you. I think this is a fantastic brainstorming session for how to how to articulate this kind of central idea of the piece. Um, it is the Earth taking the Earth taking more of a central role. But it's not necessarily that then like it's not this sort of like and the Earth gets worse and worse and like falls apart more and more and more, but because there's also this element of like, well, natural systems continue. In the way that I've been talking about the project recently, it really is also about environmental change. That even though there is like I feel tremendous grief when I think about extinction,
Yeah.
but at the same time, I know that like the kind of the basic mechanism of life will continue, and there will be new speciation, and tectonic plates will continue to move, and there will be new continents, and there will be new phenomena, and there will be. So there is this sense of, despite our, we are destroying a lot, and there is a way of thinking about that destruction that is almost giving ourselves too much power or too much of a role to say like that, like it's all over. It's like, well, yes, the world that we know is like fundamentally changing, and it will continue to fundamentally change. But there are bigger processes at work that don't make that okay, but that's like keep on going.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You say in this essay, you said Schubert's Winterreise depicts ice as a reflection of an overpowering and inescapable grief. It defines the wanderer's world.
I think that's more in more in my reading of the original cycle, where the wanderer is really trapped in his own grief, and that is reflected in this world that is trapped in ice.
Yeah.
And you can imagine that it's going to melt, but it's like it's still there.
Yeah. Yeah. What are some? You talk about the block of ice and singing in the block of ice. What are some of the other sounds that we could hear?
I think one of the major ones will be so as the ice melts, it drips, and it'll drip onto a metal panel that has a contact mic attached to it. So fortunately, we have the power to turn the drip mic on and off, so it's not going to be like a torture device of just making people for an hour and a half. But it does end up providing a kind of polyrhythm or a source of tempo that's outside of the score itself. Part of the treatment of the fragmentation and the interaction with these other sound worlds that come in is to say, like, what if we let chamber music conventions and like this idea of like tempo as this even division of time break down, and what if we then use these fragments almost in a semi-improvisatory way in conversation with the soundscapes that that Kat Austin, the sound artist, has created, and also with the sounds that are coming out of the installation. So like this drip that happens ends up being in a kind of polyrhythmic sense, and the at points also just the ice itself is mic'd, and you can hear small cracks. You can hear the sound of air bubbles in the ice. So it also ends up being a little bit of an exercise in like deep listening, or if you for the audience to really kind of listen into the materials themselves. Last fall we went to Austria, to the Alps, about 200 kilometers from Vienna, where Schubert lived. That's like the closest glacier to Vienna, and we went to the base of the glacier, and we made a lot of audio recordings, and some of that will be in the soundscapes to bring a little bit of like I would say like bring the environment of the landscape in which the piece was created to the piece itself.
That's really cool. That's really, really cool. So it's premiering at Tanglewood on April 25th of this
Yep.
year. So everyone who's at Tanglewood or around that area, make sure you go see this. Any other performances after? Is it being recorded?
It will be recorded. We're right now. I mean, the performance will be recorded, and I'm working on finding the right kind of opportunity to release it on an album and do a proper studio recording. Really time to fine tune it. We will also do a performance back in Europe at the Queen Elizabeth Music Chapel in Brussels. And actually, before the performance in Tanglewood, we won't do postWinterreise, but I have been invited to a festival in Shanghai that does music and technology, and I'll present the sound installation and do a performance and demonstration of the sound installation, some of the systems that we've built around it at the Shanghai Concert Hall, which will be a pretty wild experience to like bring it into that context.
Yeah, I can imagine.
Yeah,
that's cool. I'm glad you're getting out there and doing all this stuff.
Yeah, and then the future. I mean, you know how it is to try to sell a piece. So
Yeah.
So I'm.
This is so interesting, though. I feel like it definitely has legs.
I think so. I think so too. The place I've been at recently is like, well, got to get a booking agent on it.
That's cool. Is there anything else you want to say about it that we didn't talk about?
I feel like that's a good talk.
Yeah, I do too. Bring it to Shy.
We'll bring it to Chicago.
I feel like also Portland would just eat this up.
I feel like this too. Yeah.
Portland, Seattle.
I'll send it. Well, you've got my materials for Portland. And it is also the kind of thing where it's like, I think it could have a place in opera programs, like in opera season programming.
Yeah.
Especially for places that have like a more experimental space that's connected to their theater. Like it could exist on a proscenium, I think, but it's like when I really see it, like I see it more in like black box spaces, and or even like museum galleries or alternative spaces to the proscenium theater.
Yeah, museum galleries. I've been really interested in like tapping into that world a little bit because it's like the perfect place to do stuff like this and like a variety of other things.
I think that like there's more of an expectation, like when people go to a museum, there's more of an expectation of like that they're going to be challenged by something.
Yeah.
Like museums are cursed by like the idea that they need to be entertaining.
Cool. Well, thanks for being here, Andrew. It's really, really good to see you and to talk to you. And I've been like in the last few days, I've been thinking about our time and Aspen together, and you were like definitely one of the highlights of my time there. I just remember you was like so kind and so nice, and I'm glad that we have reconnected in this way.
Likewise. I was just singing. We were in two Sondheim scenes together. There was the duet, which I still don't remember how it went, but I did myself singing today. A weekend in the country.
Yeah.
Weekend in the country. You should try it. You haven't been getting out nearly enough.
Your memory is better than mine.
You haven't been getting out nearly enough.
What was the other one? We did two.
Yeah, we did it. We had a duet. And of course, I mean,
I don't remember.
I wish I knew my Sondheim better because it's so good.
Yeah. I feel like it was from A Little Night Music, though.
I think you were absolutely right in that memory.
Yeah.
I don't remember how it went.
Yeah. Anyway. But thanks for being here, and I'll talk to you soon.
Yeah. Take care.
To close, can we talk about what's happening in space right now? I am totally obsessed with what the crew of Artemis 2 is doing up there. You know, I've always been kind of curious about space, but the pictures they're sending back to Earth, what a weird and cool sentence, are, pardon the pun, completely out of this world. My algorithm has made a complete 180 from cat videos to all things outer space. I mean, to think that we're all floating on a ball that is sufficient enough for complex beings to exist in a vast, infinite, dark, mysterious void completely humbles you. And not only that, I'm enjoying getting to know the people creating content around this mission. I'm talking about former football players who are now astrophysicists, and not just your run-of-the-mill Bill Nye the Science Guy type of folks, and no shade to Bill, of course. But for us to live today where technology has advanced in a way that we can go along for the ride, I mean, it's changed so much even since the last space shuttle mission in 2011. We can go to the moon from the comfort of our own couches. It's pretty awesome. But my biggest takeaway, from the Earth we walk on to the infinite reaches of space, we are all living inside the greatest work of art ever to exist. So let's take care of it, okay?